Welcome. Today, we embark upon an intellectual inquiry into two figures of the medieval period who, in the popular imagination, have often become one, the Crusader and the Templar Knight. On the surface, they may appear as kindred spirits, warriors of the cross, but as we shall uncover, they represent two profoundly different conceptions of faith, of warfare, and ultimately of human purpose.
Our analysis will proceed methodically. We will begin by establishing the fundamental contrast between these two archetypes. From there, we will explore the historical turmoil that produced the Crusader, and then witness the emergence of the Templars as a disciplined, orderly response. We shall then turn to their catastrophic fall and trace the remarkable alchemy that transformed these historical soldiers into an enduring philosophical ideal.
So we must begin by drawing a very sharp distinction where popular history has often painted with a broad and frankly misleading brush. Though both were warriors engaged in holy conflict, their internal motivations, their external structures, and indeed their very destinies were worlds apart.
And this really is the central question that will animate our entire investigation. What is the fundamental difference between these two paths? This is not a simple question of armor or allegiance, but a deeper inquiry into the evolution of an idea.
Here we see the initial stark divergence. On the one hand, you have the general Crusader, a transient figure, a temporary pilgrim who takes a vow, serves his feudal lord, and is motivated by a complex mix of piety and personal ambition. On the other hand, the Templar, a permanent fixture, a man who has surrendered his will to a higher authority, bound by lifelong vows as both a monk and a soldier.
So then, from what soil did the Crusader emerge? To truly grasp this figure, we have to understand the world that forged him. This constitutes our thesis. The Crusader was a product of holy war, yes, but a holy war born from a deeply chaotic and tumultuous age.
You see, the Crusades were not conceived in a vacuum. They were, in fact, the result of a confluence of powerful societal currents. First, you had a restless, often violent warrior class in need of a sanctified purpose. Second, a newly empowered papacy, for the first time truly capable of directing that martial energy across an entire continent. And third, a pervasive, deeply felt spiritual anxiety, a societal yearning for salvation that could be channeled into armed pilgrimage.
To properly understand the Crusader, we must divest ourselves of our modern, secular lens. These were individuals who inhabited a world suffused with the divine. The unseen spiritual reality was not a matter of abstract belief. It was as tangible and as immediate as the physical world around them. Their entire reality was structured by this faith.
And so while the motivation was undeniably spiritual, the objectives were often quite worldly, quite temporal. The Crusader's quest was frequently for land, for riches, or for the personal absolution gained by fulfilling a vow, after which he would return to his former life. This confirms our thesis of a fervent, yet ultimately scattered and worldly form of holy warfare.
Now, it is in direct response to this very chaos that a new, and I would argue radically different form of warrior was conceived. This was the antithesis to the ad hoc nature of the crusading armies. This was an attempt to forge discipline, piety, and permanence into the very heart of holy war.
Their name itself is a profound statement of purpose, the poor fellow soldiers. This was a deliberate rejection of the worldly ambition and status that drove so many of their secular counterparts. Their original mission was not one of conquest, but of service, to protect the vulnerable pilgrims on the perilous roads of the Holy Land.
This table illuminates the core institutional distinctions. Notice the shift in allegiance from a local lord to the Pope himself. See how a temporary vow is replaced by permanent, monastic ones. The Templars were not merely a different type of crusader. They were a permanent, professional, hierarchical institution, the very antithesis of the decentralized feudal levy.
This singular status, bestowed upon them by the papacy, granted them an unprecedented degree of power and autonomy. They transcended feudal boundaries, answerable to no king, only to God's vicar on earth. This allowed them to build a vast logistical and financial network, but this very independence, this immense power, would ultimately sow the seeds of their own destruction.
We now arrive at a pivotal moment in our narrative, the historical annihilation of the Templar Order. For our purposes, this is more than a mere historical event. It is a profound moral lesson. A tragedy that allows the Templars to pivot from the world of fact into the realm of symbol.
Imagine, if you will, the shock that rippled through Christendom.
On a single day, Friday, October 13, 1307, the most elite, most powerful, and wealthiest military order in the Western world was decapitated in a single coordinated strike. Their swift, brutal end, orchestrated by a French king heavily in their debt, was an event that defied comprehension at the time.
And here, the interpretation begins its crucial shift. Centuries later, thinkers like the Masonic philosopher Albert Pike would look back upon this event not merely as an act of royal greed, but as a timeless philosophical allegory.
In this philosophical reading, the fall of the Templars ceases to be a simple political act. It becomes a symbolic consequence of worldly corruption. They had strayed, you see, from their founding ethos as poor soldiers. And so, in this view, they were not destroyed by an external enemy, but by an internal decay, by the very pride and riches they had accumulated.
This allegorical interpretation leads us directly to our synthesis. Here, the fallen historical warrior is resurrected, not in flesh and blood, but as a timeless philosophical ideal, most notably within the esoteric traditions of Freemasonry.
We can trace this evolution in three distinct stages. First, the historical reality of the warrior monk. Second, the moral lesson learned from his tragic downfall. And third, the rebirth of the Templar as a purely philosophical knight, whose mission is no longer external, but internal.
The Knight Kadosh of the Scottish Rite is perhaps the most direct inheritor of this philosophical legacy. This is not a historical reenactor. This is a philosophical heir, one who adopts the symbolic mantle of the Templar in an eternal war against oppression, ignorance, and tyranny in all its forms.
And with this, the entire quest is transformed. The historical Crusaders sought to liberate a physical city, Jerusalem, but the philosophical knight, the symbolic Templar, seeks the lost word, a profound metaphor for divine truth, for enlightenment. The battlefield has shifted from the deserts of the Levant to the very landscape of the human soul.
And so we reach our conclusion, wherein we can synthesize this remarkable transformation, this journey of an idea across centuries, from a man of history to a symbol of an eternal quest.
Here lies the ultimate distinction. The Crusader, for all his impact, remains largely a figure bound to a specific time and place. The Templar, however, by virtue of his dramatic rise, his spectacular fall, and his subsequent symbolic rebirth, transcends history. He becomes an archetype, the eternal seeker of truth, martyred by the very world he sought to serve.
This image encapsulates the entire intellectual journey we have traced, a migration from the dusty chronicles of war to the quiet contemplation of the library, an evolution from a historical actor into a potent philosophical idea.
We leave you with this final contemplative question. The story of the Templar serves as a powerful reminder that the past is never inert. It is constantly re-examined, reinterpreted, and imbued with new meaning to serve the deep philosophical needs of the present. Consider this as we conclude our inquiry.